A boy can bring anything to life with his magic crayon, but when someone else steals its power, his world turns into a nightmare. Can he take it back before everything is destroyed?
Draw.
In a magical storybook world, a boy named Harold discovers a purple crayon that brings anything he draws to life. With it, he creates two friends, Moose and Porcupine, and together they explore endless adventures. But one day, they hear a mysterious voice, Crockett Johnson, their creator, telling their story. Before they can learn more, he suddenly disappears. Confused and determined to find him, Harold uses his crayon to draw a portal to the real world for him and his friends to go through and uncover the truth. Harold steps through first and finds himself in human form. Excited to see the real world, he quickly realizes his outfit looks odd. To blend in, he grabs some clothes from a free store. Meanwhile, Moose hesitates at the portal until Porcupine gives him a little encouragement with her quills, shoving him through. But in the process, she's left behind. Moose, now human too, eventually reunites with Harold. Spotting an elderly man, they assume he's the one they're looking for. But the moment they approach, the man's reaction sends them running. Okay, maybe not the old man they needed. Back in the storybook world, Porcupine refuses to be left behind. Using every trick she knows, she finally forces the portal open and crosses into the real world. Meanwhile, Harold draws a bicycle and brings it to life. However, while riding recklessly on the main road, he and Moose accidentally swerve into the path of an oncoming car. In the chaos, Moose momentarily transforms, startling a woman named Terry and her son Mel. The distraction causes Terry to swerve, resulting in a flat tire. While she assesses the damage and calls for help, Harold secretly draws a new tire for her. Mel, puzzled by how the tire appeared, watches as his mother changes it. Impressed by their kindness, Terry offers them a ride. During the trip, she realizes they have nowhere to stay. With some convincing from Mel, she allows them to stay in a room above her garage. Meanwhile, Porcupine has her own adventure. Spotting a house with purple flowers, she assumes Harold left it as a clue. She ends up sneaking inside and eating a cake before triggering the house alarm. The homeowners, alarmed by the intrusion, threaten to call the police. Detectives Silva and Love are assigned to track her down, especially after she crosses paths with the same elderly man that Harold and Moose encountered. That night, Harold bonds with Mel, who confesses that he struggles to fit in at school. When Mel sees Harold using the crayon, he feels a connection, as he has an imaginary friend named Carl, a strange hybrid creature. Harold demonstrates the crayon's magic by drawing a butterfly. He then hands Mel the crayon, letting him try it out. Mel draws a spiderfly and brings it to life, only to realize how terrifying it actually is. The following day, Terry is a little annoyed to see a whole lot of pies on her kitchen table and her house painted purple overnight. However, she tries her best to appear nonchalant.
So can we not do magic crayons, please?
Terry asks Mel to leave for school and asks the other two men to see their way out of her house. Before leaving, Harold breaks off a piece of his crayon and gifts a part to Mel, who is already familiar with its magical powers. Mel decides to help Harold and Moose track down their old man. To make the journey more fun, Harold draws skateboards and shoes for them, and they playfully ride to the library. At the library, they meet Gary Natwick, a failed fantasy writer who secretly harbors a crush on Terry. His novel features a warrior princess named Zeri, who, as Harold points out, closely resembles Terry. Winning Gary over, they convince him to use his computer to search for Harold's creator. However, their vague descriptions yield no real results. Amused, Gary jokingly suggests that Harold should write messages in the sky for his father to see. Unbeknownst to him, Harold takes the suggestion literally. Outside, Harold begins to draw a plane, and Gary witnesses him using the crayon to magically create the plane, which lets him know where Harold has come from. Oh, this just got interesting. He grabs a copy of Harold's book and begins to plot something. Harold, Moose, and Mel take to the skies in the plane, leaving Terry's phone number in the air as a message. However, Harold fails to realize that the entire city can now see the number. Soon, Terry is bombarded with calls from elderly men hoping for a romantic connection. Oh no.
You left me a message in the sky.
Meanwhile, Moose involuntarily morphs again, forcing them to abandon the plane and parachute down into town. Mel goes to school, where two bullies try to take his whistle, an item linked to his imaginary friend Carl. In defense, Mel elbows one of them in the face. This lands him in the principal's office. Later, Harold and Moose visit Terry at work, where she struggles with her overbearing boss. When she has to leave to deal with Mel, the duo decides to help at her job, despite not actually being hired. Bored, Harold uses his crayon to
Do you
cause
guys sell
chaos,
pumas?
bringing a live puma into the store and upgrading a coin-operated ride with a propeller, causing a child to take off midair. Oh, come on! Now the mum too? The resulting mayhem gets Terry fired, though she admits she never liked the job anyway. In the square, Harold draws a piano for her, knowing she once loved music but stopped playing after her husband's passing. As she plays a lively tune, Porcupine creates trouble at a nearby diner, drawing the attention of detectives Silva and Love. Gary tracks down Harold and Moose, pulling them away from Terry and Mel. He reveals the book Harold and the Purple Crayon and tells them about Crockett Johnson. Just as Harold processes this news, Porcupine reunites with them. But their joy is short-lived as Silva tackles her, leading to the trio's arrest. At school, Mel is locked in a closet by bullies. Remembering the crayon piece Harold gave him, he draws Carl to life. Carl breaks them out, scaring the bullies in the process. In jail, Harold, Moose, and Porcupine plot their escape. They retrieve the confiscated crayon and break out, using a wrecking ball, of course, like smashing through walls. They rush to pick up Mel before heading to Johnson's house. Gary tries to pursue them, eager to steal the crayon's power. Upon arrival, they meet Ms. Barnaby, the caretaker, who explains that Johnson passed away and his home is now a museum. Terry arrives, scolding Harold for meddling in their lives. Heartbroken, Harold begins to doubt himself, causing everything he has drawn, including Moose and Porcupine, to vanish. Alone and disheartened, Harold encounters Gary again. Manipulating him, Gary convinces Harold to hand over the crayon. With its power, Gary imprisons Harold in a dungeon of his own creation. Mel shows up, having figured out something was wrong, but he gets trapped too.
Leave him alone, let him go.
After Gary leaves, Mel pulls out the piece of crayon and draws a key to free themselves. Gary goes into the town square to create his world, while Terry finds out Mel isn't home. Harold arrives with Mel to confront Gary. As he is not willing to give up, Harold tries to battle him by drawing things to use against him, and Gary in turn fights against him. After drawing a large spring that shields himself from Gary's attack, it knocks Gary on the ground, and he tries to take back the crayon from him, but Gary ends up swallowing his piece of the crayon, which allows him to harness the crayon's power with his own hands. Oh no, now he's got ultimate crayon powers? This is bad. Terry arrives later on, and Gary eventually causes wreckage to the land, which makes Harold fall off and drop the crayon. Mel summons Carl to breathe fire and fight Gary, but is eventually overpowered by him. When all hope seems lost, Moose and Porcupine revive, helping Harold recover the missing crayon piece. Harold redraws the spider fly, which attacks and ends up in Gary's mouth. Moose then morphs again to headbutt the crayon out of Gary's stomach, stripping him of his power and undoing everything he created, restoring normalcy. Seeing Gary upset about not being accepted, Harold draws a door to let him enter a real version of his fantasy world, complete with the Terry clone. Grateful, Gary thanks Harold, but Carl burns the door, ensuring Gary can never return. Later, everyone visits the Johnson Museum to learn how Harold's world was made. Harold asks Miss Barnaby why Johnson created him, and she leads him to a note Johnson left just for him. The message encourages Harold to believe in himself and use his imagination to inspire other kids. Harold, Moose, and Porcupine say goodbye to Terry and Mel before returning home with crayons in new colors to keep expanding their world. During the credits, Gary tries to impress Zeri, the Terry clone, only to find out she's already dating a wizard from that world. Oof, not only did he lose the battle, but he lost the girl too. Kindly subscribe now and turn on notifications. Your support means a lot to us. Every subscription helps us bring you more amazing stories. If you enjoyed this, please like, share, and comment. What would you draw with a magic crayon? We truly appreciate your support.